because then everybody.
Can you move down to the next panel? There we go. So, Evan, did you want to kick this off?
Not John, not necessarily. I'll let you take care. I'll let you take.
Okay, that's fine. Well, good greetings, everyone. What you see up on the screen is the agenda for the meeting. If you don't have access to the screen, I'll take you through it. Tonight, what we're going to cover is an update on the renovation plans, including some additional ideas, an introduction then to other members of the team that we're working with, and in particular with Housing to Homes, which is a relocation consulting firm that has particular expertise in this area. We'll also go over the meeting guidelines, and which we ought to do up front, actually. And then we'll turn over the meeting. I'm going to give a presentation. I'll walk you through just kind of a summary of where things are with the renovation and some ideas we have for the parking lot. And then after that, we'll do an update and introduce Housing to Homes. They'll do a presentation on the relocation. And then they'll also talk about COVID-19 regulations and precautions that will be in, that will be working with and working under those regulations during the relocation. And then we'll go to questions and answers. So for the meeting guidelines, I think we're gonna, we haven't talked about this just before the meeting, but because we're having to do this virtually, it's different and a little bit more challenging than doing it in person. When we last met to go over the renovation, that was in mid to late November, and it was in person. We were able to do that outdoors even during COVID because we were in a better place. The weather was also more conducive. We thought we'd be able to do this meeting indoors, but then Omicron hit, and so that's why we're having to do it virtually. Hopefully, we'll be able to go back to in-person meetings. I want to just kind of remind everybody or refresh everybody that when we met in November, we promised that we would have another meeting in January to update you, which is what we're doing now, and that we then follow that with monthly updates, and we would we'd come back and present to you any updates on the renovation and any ideas or any questions that have been addressed, and the relocation each month between now and the start of construction, which will most likely take place in October of 2022. So the meeting guidelines are, because it's virtual and we can't really see people very well, all questions are being handled like they were in the past in our virtual meetings through the chat facility. So if you've got questions as we go along, put them into the chat, type out your questions, put them in the chat, and we'll read those and go over those as they came in at the end. If we aren't able to get through all of the questions, we'll try to answer all of those questions that we weren't able to get to in this meeting and put the question and the answer online for you. And if anybody has questions after the meeting, Raquel can talk about, I think, the way that you can get those questions to us by using the email address that's provided, or there should be a question box in the tenant, in the resident services office. I don't have that email address with me handy right now. Raquel, do you have the address?
Is that the CHBTA email?
It is.
It's CHB redevelopment
CHB redevelopment
@gmail.com.
@gmail.com. So it's CHB redevelopment @gmail.com. And I think that might have been on the invitation. I hope it was.
It was.
We'll take a look at the invitations to these meetings and kind of expand. And I've gotten some feedback on ways to improve the invitation from some residents that have called me. So we'll try to incorporate those into future meetings. So would you change the countertop in the kitchen to something other than the ones we have? That's from Cynthia Hall. So why don't I, if you can turn over the, let's go to the next tab, see what's next here. All right, so the other members of the team that right now are the NHP Foundation, Win, but I don't know that Win Win isn't doing a presentation. I think they're available if there are questions having to do with relocation that would involve Win. But then we'll go into the discussion by homes, housing to homes, and we'll do a more full introduction when it's their time, and I'll let Evan do that introduction. So if you can give me control of the screen so I can put up my PDF, Raquel. All right, let's see here.
Sure. So remember, guys, if you guys have questions or chat, just feel free to chat it in the box and I'll respond either online, or John will respond online or live during the session.
So can you see this resident survey results?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to, I know for everybody that was at the November meeting, you've seen this, but I wanted to go back through it and let you know that we are modeling the renovation based on what's needed at the property, which we're doing that based on information that's coming back from our engineers and inspectors who've gone out and inspected the property. But we also did this survey, and all of these items that scored high on the survey are included in the renovation. So the biggest items were replace kitchen countertops and kitchen cabinets. Those came in at 50% of the roughly 50 to 45% of the folks that responded to the survey wanting to see those done. And in most of the units, the cabinets and countertops are pretty old, and in some cases are in poor condition. And so those are being replaced throughout. So you'll have new cabinets, kitchen cabinets, and new countertops. I understand that some residents recently had their cabinets replaced and their units renovated. We're doing inspections of each of the units and doing a matrix. So we'll develop a list of those units that we think don't need, the kitchen cabinets replaced. And I don't think it will be very many units. And I think what we'll try to do is get back with those residents who show up on the list as not needing their cabinets replaced, just to make sure that we didn't make a mistake and you actually have old crummy cabinets and we got you on the wrong list, to confirm that yes, your cabinets are in good shape and they don't need replaced. I actually was talking to one of the residents today who is saying, I don't want my cabinets replaced because they're brand new. So we're going to try to make sure we accommodate that sort of situation too. Although almost all of the cabinets are going to be replaced, as will the entry doors, other interior doors. We're replacing kitchen and bathroom sinks. And so I'm going to move down here to a typical unit. The unit, and this, some of you have already seen this, so this is just going to be confirmation that we're still following this plan where we're going back in with new flooring. The flooring that we're going in with is luxury vinyl tile that will look like wood flooring. We'll have a different type of flooring in the bathrooms that will probably be ceramic, but it may also be a different type of vinyl tile that so that you don't have exactly the same tile running through the whole unit. So you'll have a different tile in the bathroom. One of the questions that we had raised was that tile, which is, is going to look really nice and will wear very well. It particularly in the garden units, it may be noisy. Is there anything we can do about that? And so what we're doing is we're checking with the architect and the contractor to see if they can go out and order area rugs that would be made from normal carpet floor covering that would have the edges all sewed and seamed so it won't unravel. And it wouldn't cover the whole floor, but it would cover the walking areas in places like the living room and possibly bedrooms, so that you have that floor covering if you want it. This is a new thing that we're looking into. I can't sit here today and tell you we'll be able to do that everywhere, but I wanted to let you know that we are trying to get the cost identified to see if we can do that. We go out to a manufacturer and have them do area rugs fitted, custom fitted. Again, they'll be out of regular carpet for each of the units. So we're trying to figure out if we can make that happen. We're replacing the bathroom fixtures, the light fixtures, the sink, the vanity. We're doing brand new windows in all of the units, the windows that we have now, except in a few select cases where the windows had to be replaced. All of the windows are coming back in with new high efficiency windows that will be nicely sealed so you won't have drafty windows. New doors, new LED lighting, new heating, ventilation and air conditioning. Some of the units, I believe, particularly in the garden apartments, the heating and air conditioning on the larger units that you have right now is it was under engineered, under specified, so it doesn't really do a very good job. So that'll get corrected in the rehab. And then new plumbing including all of the wastewater, which is leaking like crazy, especially in the high rise, but also in many of the garden units. And we're finishing up testing to find out the extent to which we have to replace the freshwater plumbing. We know we have to replace it in all of the high rise. I think we're going to have to replace it in the gardens too, even though the leaking from the freshwater, the supply lines isn't as great, but the preliminary indication from an engineering company that we've hired to test the piping is that even where it's not leaking, it's the walls of the pipes are getting very thin and it's reaching the end of its useful life, and which means that sometime in the next, 3 to 10 years, it's going to start springing leaks. And if that's the case, we need to replace it now because we get this one chance to do the kind of renovation that we need to do to keep the property in good shape for the next 15 to 20 years. You can only do this kind of refinancing at a maximum really once every 15 years. And typically it's more like 17, 18 years that it happens. So when we do this, we need to make sure that those big systems like the plumbing are taken care of for the next 15 to 20 years. We had gone over this the last time. We also talked about improvements to the exterior of the building, and we had a meeting with the architect and the design group last week to go over plans for the property. Most of the exterior renovation will be done with colors. We looked at adding attachment. The high-rise building is, I don't know how else to put it, but it's the building that needs the most by way of beautification, because it's just a big old shoebox sitting out there on the street, basically. So the way to sort of break that up is to do something nice with backlit lettering and different colors to help sort of highlight the verticality. We'll also be putting, and you don't see it in this picture, but we'll be putting quite a bit of nice landscaping along the front of the building. I hope at the next building, we'll have a building exterior renovation improvement plan that we can show you what is being proposed for both what's really being proposed, the final product, for the high rise and the gardens. This is just a good example of what it is likely to be. It'll be pretty close to what it looks like. We're looking at doing something more to that very top edge of the building to give it some, something that kind of sticks out and gives it a better identity, and then something again along the bottom, maybe changing the entries so that they come out. We're looking at the main building entry for the 2900 building to bring it out and have an area that is enclosed, that when people are sitting out there waiting for a ride to pick them up, they can be inside of that building, or inside of that entry space, but out of the weather. So we're looking at doing similar things for the gardens. The gardens don't need quite as much as far as just the building, and mostly it's because they have better landscaping, and that helps the buildings, just the look of the buildings. But the entry doors, those security doors in the gardens are in pretty bad shape, so we're looking at ways to replace those and do something with those entries through the security doors that makes it a more attractive looking entry. I think the big thing that we didn't talk about, well, let me go to the next thing. We talked about updates to the community space to create more spaces for smaller events and functions. This is what we presented the last time. We're still working to see if there are ways to make this more functional, to have more multi-purpose rooms without breaking up that space as much as this. I actually didn't like this plan very well because I thought it broke up the big space too much. So one of the ways that we're looking at doing that is with convention center type walls that can be partition walls that are movable. So you can open up and have the whole space, or you can pull a partition wall, seal it off, and they have sound barriers. So you can seal it off, and then the back part, you could create new spaces. However, we've been looking at ways to create just additional community space for residents of Columbia Heights Village. We've also, as part of the survey that we did, we asked you what your thoughts were on adding more housing in places where we could do that, like the parking lot behind the 2900 building. And we received a number of suggestions, which were much appreciated. After we introduced this idea, it was really back in the spring in that series of virtual meetings that we held. And we've been looking at ways to do something on the parking lot. And we didn't have, in the meeting that we had in November, we didn't have anything ready yet to present. We have that now. And so I wanted to show you what we're considering for the parking lot. So if you can see this, this is a plan looking down, straight down onto the high-rise building, which I just highlighted here. And then over here is the parking lot. That parking lot currently has 65 parking spaces. Before we could do anything on the parking lot, we knew we couldn't lose those parking spaces. We had to make sure that, because those parking spaces are already being used by residents of Columbia Heights Village. So we were looking at ways first to build something on the parking lot that would enable us to retain the parking spaces. And the only way to do that is to build a parking garage in that parking lot space. And so the building that I'll show you next, the plan is to have 2.5 levels of parking. So we've replaced the existing 65 spaces of parking with new parking in a structured parking garage that would have 109 spaces. So the residents of Columbia Heights Village would have the same access to the parking that they have now, 65 spaces. They'd have rights to those parking spaces for the next 99 years under a lease agreement or an easement that goes on in perpetuity. So you wouldn't lose any parking spaces. The residents of the new building would have parking spaces also. So what the new building would look like as it's currently envisioned would be a first floor that has parking and offices and community spaces. And then above that, it would have 6 floors of residential, some more offices and community spaces on this second floor. This is kind of a nice bird's eye perspective looking down on the building. So it would be a U-shaped building that would have outdoor community area that is raised one floor off of the street. So residents in this building can look down on and still feel connected to the street and what's going on the street, but they'll have that sort of additional security of being one floor above the street if they want to have events or things like that planned for this space. Now, this space should also be available similar to community space in the existing building. You'd have to reserve it, but should be available for functions of residents of Columbia Heights Village. So I'm gonna go down this is the first floor, and it's looking down at a plan on the first floor. The first floor, as you can see, is mostly parking. I'm gonna blow it up so you can see it a little better. Is mostly parking. You'd enter in over on the right side, which you can't see, but where I'm kind of over here, if this plan was extended, this is the current high-rise building. So you enter into the parking lot coming down, it's Harvard Street, I believe, over on the side. And then you go right into the parking lot. So your parking will be basically in the same place it is now. The difference is it'll actually be covered and well lit, and so you'll be out of the rain and the snow and things like that. The other use for this first floor of the new proposed building is, main entry lobby with a place for a guard, and then the leasing office over here in this area, and then basic offices for this building, and then additional service spaces over here. For some of it could be used for residents of Columbia Heights Village. We were thinking of things like resident council meetings, stuff like that could be in here, or just meetings that are reserved for your purposes. Then up on the next floor, which is the second floor of this building, if I can get to it. Yeah, here we go. The second floor space, need to shrink it down a little bit. The second floor space would have some apartments, and those are the red and sort of orange and red and orange colored spaces, and also yellow spaces. These green spaces will be additional community space for this building and for residents of Columbia Heights Village. So the nice thing about this community space is not only is it more community space, but these two parts of the community space through here that I've just highlighted, they have direct access out onto that raised terrace that I showed you earlier, which is right out here. So those community spaces are on this second floor on the right side of the building. And if you have events or functions that you want to have indoors and outdoors, that's actually a nice feature. You can go from indoors to outdoors onto the terrace. Let's see, so back here. So the other thing that we're going to have in this building, I'm going to go back to the ground floor and take a look at that space, blow it up. We'll have resident services and case offices for social service providers. This building will be, as it's designed, it would have 109 units. And they'd be mostly 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. There'll be a small group of 6 3-bedroom units, just because the district wants to have a few, 3-bedroom units in any buildings that they approve. They don't specifically say that, but they're looking for, adding some bigger units, and we thought we could put in a small handful of bigger units into this building. The income profile on the building is going to have 20% of the units, or 21 units out of the total 109 units. 21 units will be set aside and reserved for households that earn 30% area median income or less. Those units are going to come with full resident services called permanent supportive services. And so that's why we have these special offices for resident service and case officers to provide social services, particularly for that group of 21 units. The other 80% of the building, or about 89 units, that will be for residents who earn either 50% area median income or less, up to a maximum of 50% area median income or less, or 60% area median income or less. And as of today, I can't give you the exact breakdown between the 60 and 50. We want to put in 60% area median income units to have a nice mix of income ranges in this building. They may end up all being 50% area median income or less, just because of district requirements for funding to get this building done. They kind of push developers to, particularly on new construction, to have greater affordability. So it's quite possible that all of the units would be no greater than 50% AMI or less. So one of the questions that I think people might ask is, if I want to move into this building, can I? And the answer is yes, you can, and there's nothing that prevents you from doing that. However, this building is not going to have Section 8. So if you'd have to consider that, whether or not, if your income right now, for Section 8 it has to be 50% or less of area median income. A lot of residents currently in Columbia Heights Village have incomes that are quite a bit less than 50%. So you'd have to look at the rents and figure out if it makes sense to you to give up your the unit in Columbia Heights Village with Section 8 to move over here. For some residents, you may want to do that. Others, you may not. But there's not going to be any prohibition preventing you from moving into this building if you wanted to, and if it works in your budget. Let's see. So let me go back and also say that 20% of the 21 units in this building that are going to be set aside, excuse me, let me get a drink of water. That will be set aside for households that earn 30% area median income or less. The intended use of those units is for folks that are either about to become homeless because they've lost their job, or they don't have a job and they are currently on a homeless waiting list. So that 20% has that permanent supportive housing service, because those residents will need those services to be fully integrated within this building that has 80% of folks that aren't at any risk of homelessness. They just need affordable housing. Let's see, what else can I tell you about the plans for this building? Okay, I'm gonna blow up a little bit, just so you can see the sort of basic unit design. It's going to be a standard unit. These two units through here are 2-bedroom units with a slightly different floor plan, where the units, in one case, they're separated by a living room, and in the other case, they're both they're also separated by a living room. So they're pretty standard floor plan units. As we get the floor plans more developed, I'm happy to share those. But before we got too much farther, I wanted to just present, here we go. Here's some floor plans, basic living areas. This over here is a basic 1-bedroom unit. So, there isn't a lot that you do with a 1-bedroom unit. There's a living area, kitchen, and bedroom with a bathroom. This is a kind of a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom with a den. Same kind of concept. It's pretty basic, but they'll be nice units. They'll be brand new with obviously new finishes everywhere, which is what we're trying to do over at Columbia Heights Village in the renovation, to change all the flooring, the countertops, cabinets, so that Columbia Heights Village in the units itself, they look new. So I think that kind of summarizes it. Again, before we went much further with this, we wanted to present it to you, get your feedback, whether you think this is an attractive building, whether you like the idea. I also want to talk about parking, I guess. During construction, they're going to be constructing this building on the parking lot. So during construction, the parking lot will be gone because you can't use it because there's construction going on. The construction of this building should take about 18 months. So about 1.5 years. During that 1.5 years, we have found parking that is, I believe it is 2 blocks north. It's basically a public parking garage, I think, that they'll lease us the spaces we need to replace this parking for that 1.5 years. So it will be a little farther away, but it'll still be right there in Columbia Heights in the neighborhood. And it will be up by, Evan, do you want to chime in with some details if you've got them on where that parking would be located?
Sure. So it'll be near the Chick-fil-A and the Target in that shopping center.
Okay. So I think that's the summary here. I wanted to, before we moved on, wanted to just take a look at the chat section. And are there any questions about this building that have been asked that we probably ought to address now before we kind of forget them and move on to the next piece?
Yeah, so hold on, John, there are a whole lot of questions in the queue. And I'm trying to get Cynthia Hall up to the stage, and Paul Jones had a question before we even got into all the questions, just for clarity.
Hey, everybody. So just for clarity, John, so everybody that's on this call now, on the Zoom, they all live in CHV. And just for clarity and for everybody to know, after the remodeling and redevelopment is done, everybody has an opportunity or a place to move back on the property. Not speaking of this new building, but actually on the existing buildings that we have now, correct?
Yeah, and Paul, thanks for raising that. I apologize. I have made it a sort of a, I've tried to always start these meetings by telling you all that, number one, nobody is going to be permanently displaced and forced out after the renovate. There will be temporary relocation during the renovation. And we'll talk about that more next. But after the renovation is done, you'll all be able to move back in, and you'll all be able to move back into your apartment, the one that you moved out of. And it'll be renovated, and it'll be, like virtually like a new apartment. It won't be 100% like new, but you'll have new kitchens, bathrooms, countertops, flooring, windows, doors, things like that. So you will absolutely be able to move back in. There is no chance that you're going to be moved out and that will come back and say, that's my wife calling me. I'm going to just send her a text telling her I'm in a meeting, and I'll call her back later. Sorry about that. She's out of town on the road, and I just want to make sure that she isn't having any car problems or something.
All right, really quick, while you're doing that, John, Evan?
I did it. I just
did it?
sent her.
I was gonna say,
Can I call you back?
Can we get that email again? It's CHV redevelopment@gmail. Was that the email?
CHV redevelopment, REDEVELOPMENT, CHV redevelopment at
Gmail.com.
gmail.com.
I included that in the chat just in case anyone wanted to.
Good.
Come at that too.
So just to finish that thought, there's no chance that we can come back and say, oh, we've changed plans and you can't move out. There's not only no plan to convert Columbia Heights Village into luxury high, you all have heard the horror stories of developers who move people out and then change the plan on them, and then they can't get back into their apartments. We aren't going to do that for a couple of reasons. One, because we're a nonprofit housing provider that is, our whole mission is to preserve and enhance and create affordable housing. So it would wipe out our tax exempt status as a nonprofit. The other reason is, even if we were, for some reason, everybody changed at NHPF, new people came in and they wanted to do that, they couldn't do it because of the other restrictions through the Section 8 contract that we have with HUD, through the financing that is the only way to pay for this redevelopment, for us to pay for the redevelopment, through an existing use restriction agreement that runs for another, runs through 2031 to 33. We just couldn't do it even if we wanted to, and we don't want to. But so everybody will be able to move back into their unit. So that's a long answer,
Okay.
but it's really important that everybody understands that. But that's the long answer to your question, Paul.
John, will they be moving into the same exact unit?
Yes, they will. If they want to transfer to a different unit, let's say they're a family that's in a 2-bedroom unit, they've outgrown their 2 and they need a 3, then we'll try to figure out a way to do that. But that's basically the same as what we're doing right now. With, there have to be available units for people. And so we have to live with the Section 8 policies and requirements for unit sizing, but because everybody in small groups of about 50 people, they're going to move out, we're going to renovate those units, and then that's all that is available to move folks back into for the most part. So they'll all move back into their same unit.
Okay, so there is no preference. I just want to try to frame it because that was a lot of information I went through, and we have so many questions and we want to make sure we get to them all. So just to make sure people know that because you have your Section 8, you're coming back into your unit the same. So when he was talking about the 20% and the 50%, these are for the other units, correct? Like the other units that you had to allocate towards different, AMI levels to actually satisfy different.
Well, what I was talking, there are 2 different things going on here. There's this proposed, what we're saying we would like to build on the parking lot. And that's separate from the renovation of Columbia Heights Village, except that we're renovating a parking lot. That the building that I think you see up on the screen, if it's still up there, that doesn't impact any apartment units. It's just completely separate.
This is the parking lot building, the new ones that are coming in.
Yes.
How many units are in here?
109 units. No, there's no units in Columbia Heights. Of the 406 units in Columbia Heights Village, none of those units get affected by building this building on the parking lot. What does get affected in the short term is that anybody that's using parking on the parking lot, that parking would be replaced during that 18-month construction period by the parking that Evan and I were talking about, that is just north on 14th Street. And then after completion of this building, anybody that has parking on the parking lot would be able to use the new parking garage in this building. But no units, nobody has to move out of a unit because of this building. There's, that's just not an issue.
Is that good for you, Paul?
And
So,
and excuse me for 1 second, John. Just for clarity, and it would be good if we can have somebody from management on the call. In regards to, you spoke of the downsizing or upsizing. You have your family's larger. You had a 2-bedroom. You need a 3-bedroom. You have a 1-bedroom. You might need a 2-bedroom. The process for getting transferred to a larger unit is the same process that's currently in place now.
yeah,
You will have to contact somebody in the management office and place your name on the list that they have already established for being transferred.
right.
The transfers will take place in the current buildings that are here now, which means the 2900 building or the garden apartments on Columbia Road or the garden apartments on 14th Street or within the 2900 building. That's where the transfers will take place at. So that process will remain the same as it's always been, and that's according to HUD regulations. Thank you.
I just realized something that hopefully this makes it clear and gives everybody reassurance that they can move back in. Right now, you have a lease with Columbia Heights Village Apartments, and it's a HUD-approved lease that HUD has signed off on. During the construction of Columbia Heights Village, or not the construction, the renovation of Columbia Heights Village, all the existing buildings. That lease agreement with Columbia Heights Village, even when you move off-site temporarily, you're still gonna have that lease. We're not gonna cancel that lease. That lease still stays in effect. Which that, I think, by itself guarantees that you get to move back in because you still have a lease with Columbia Heights Village. That's the way HUD does it on these deals. It's called a pass-through lease, so that you move out and temporarily for approximately 2 to 2.5 months, and into that temporary relocation building, which we'll talk about more in this next segment. And then, but you keep the lease, so you move right back in at the end of the renovation into your existing unit. So now that's the basic plan. If you need to upsize, you know, maybe during that construction period, we can find a unit for you to upsize. If not, it's really the same as it is now. So I hope that's clear. What's the next question that we should try to answer about this new building that's proposed on the parking lot? Because I know, while you're looking for it, I know there was some concern by some residents that we were trying to hide this building from everybody, and we're not, because it doesn't take away your apartments. We just didn't have anything ready to present to you. We were still trying to work it all out with the architect to come up with something that could fit on the lot, could replace the parking, was actually doable from a cost perspective, and would be a nice building. Because we don't want to build something that it detracts from the neighborhood. We want to build something that adds to it.
So there is I think you already answered it with this building that's on the screen. Will it be apartments and mixed use? This is the 20% to 50%, the 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom mixed use.
Mixed use, no. There won't be mixed use in this building. If by mixed use you mean a mix of residential and retail, like say restaurants or grocery stores, things like that. Because this building is set back off of 14th Street, putting in retail here is very difficult to get retail to, especially right now after COVID. COVID has kind of decimated retail and office buildings. And in order to get it financed, nobody will finance retail that's currently for this size project anyway. New retail space that's fairly expensive off of 14th Street. On that 14th Street corridor, we could maybe do retail, but here we really can't. So it's not mixed use. It's all apartments, except for the other use would be community space and our own offices to run the building and to help supplement anything that needs to be supplemented in for the rest of Columbia Heights Village.
Okay, there's a question. Is there an option to allocate money to create a multi-floor parking lot? The parking on 14th?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool.
So Ms. Raquel, excuse me for 1 second. So that question was answered. John said that the parking under the new building will have the 65 spaces along with the additional space, the 65 spaces which we already currently have behind 2900, along with additional spaces to accommodate the new building. There's a new building question here in the queue. I think this is a good question. Is the new building going to be considered CHVA, or will it have another name?
Oh, it will have a different name, and technically it won't be, it'll be a different building from Columbia Heights Village. All of Columbia Heights Village will stay the same as Columbia Heights Village. All 406 units that are currently in Columbia Heights Village will be Columbia Heights Village. This building, we came up with a different, it'll have a different name, and the name that we've come up with and that we're recommending, because it's just kind of a typical naming convention. And because of this little courtyard there, because it's on Harvard Street, and because of that courtyard, you can kind of see in the right-hand corner of the picture there, it says Harvard Court. So that's the proposed name for the building. We thought about Harvard Terrace. If anybody has recommendations for a name that you'd like, we would welcome those. We don't claim to be, to have the only names that are possible. But I like those names, Harvard Court, Harvard Terrace, just because it kind of describes the building. It has a nice feel to the name, I think, and it describes the location.
And real quick, Ms. Jones, the other question that I know that a lot of people have, but I see it's in the queue. The person said, how can they go about moving into the new building? And John, before we answer that question, I would like that you think about this and know the exact process, or defer this question to another time so we won't give them the wrong information about how they will be able, or if they will be able to move into the new building. Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Yeah, well, it would be a similar process to any kind of new move. We would give you, I think we'd be able to give you priority on a waiting list. And this building is new, it probably won't have a waiting list coming out of the ground, but you'd need to sit down and talk to management. You might want to talk to resident services too, to make sure that you're, well, I guess the very first thing that you'd want is to find out from us what the rents are that you'd have to pay in this building if you fit in that 50% area median income tranche. And if you're a Section 8 resident, right now you would fit into the 50%. And so we just, look at your income and make sure that that it's affordable for you. And if it works out and you want to move in and you're willing to give up your Section 8, there's, it's a pretty simple process. I just would encourage everybody to understand, and I want to reemphasize that this building won't have the Section 8 subsidy. There's a limited amount of subsidy that the city has. There'll be a subsidy for those folks that are threatened with homelessness. None of you are threatened with homelessness simply because you currently have a home. So you wouldn't fit into those 21 units, that 30% AMI. You'd have to fit into the rest of the units that are either at 50 or 60%. So I think the issue isn't how would you get into the building. The real question is, can you afford it? And do you want to make that move and lose your Section 8? So as we get more information about rent levels, we'll pass that on to you. And you can be thinking about that if you, for those of you who are interested, you could be thinking about whether it fits with your lifestyle and budget, et cetera. It's not going to be high-end rent, but it's going to be the rent that, for a tax credit building, which would be kind of pricey for quite a few folks. Some folks, it wouldn't be a problem.
Real quick, John, there's a question, will this new building have the same management company?
I don't know the answer to that right now. The assumption is yes, it would, and it really should have the same management because it makes it more efficient to run management with the same company on, out of all of our buildings. So assume that it would have the same management company as we have at Columbia Heights Village, at any given time. Management now is Wynn Residential. So if this building was finished today, management, for efficiencies should be Wynn also. If for any reason we end up changing management, then we would try to make sure the management is the same on both buildings, I think.
Is this new building a tax credit property? Did you guys receive like tax credit?
It will be a tax credit property if we build it. However, we don't have tax credits, and we wouldn't go out and get tax credits or subsidies and secure those prior to presenting this to you. We have made an application with the district, and we're going to submit really the real application to the district in the next month or so. But before doing that and trying to get financing for it, it was just important that we present this to the residents of Columbia Heights Village first, because even though it doesn't impact the residential units, it currently is part of the Columbia Heights Village property. It's that parking lot. So yes, I want to be clear. We don't already have tax credits. That wouldn't seem right to go out and get tax credits without talking to the residents first, because if you guys come back and say we hate it, we will never approve this, then we would have made a commitment to the city to use tax credits, and we wouldn't do that without talking to you guys first.
Okay, Virginia asks if, she said there's a huge rodent problem. And so because there's so many questions, I'm working from like the bottom up. So I apologize if for those that have asked the questions first. I'm just trying to just roll up from the bottom up. There's a huge rodent problem. So how do you plan to rectify that? It's a health hazard when mice are running in and out of our stoves, leaving excrements, I guess, like, feces and stuff along the way.
Yeah, the rodent problem, I think, is in the existing building. Well, I know it is because we don't have a new building yet. I'm trying to find these questions so I can kind of take a look at them too. Rodents and other pests are an issue, and to some extent a problem in all apartments, whether they're luxury or affordable or more deeply affordable with Section 8 throughout the district. And in the Columbia Heights neighborhood, because there are a lot of restaurants, there's a bigger rodent problem than in some other neighborhoods, but it's not unique to here. So I can't promise you that we've figured out a way to get rid of all pests and all rodents. That just would not be true. However, within the building, there are lots of open spaces that rodents and other pests can move. So if you bring in an exterminator, you may get rid of some of the problem, but mostly what you're ending up doing, or maybe not mostly, but you get rid of some of the problem, but the problem that you didn't get rid of, you just move it over somewhere else in the building through those openings. So as part of the renovation, and those openings are mostly in walls that are between apartments, where kitchens and bathrooms and to some extent utility closets, if they do touch the next apartment, where there are penetrations and openings between apartments behind the walls so rodents can run through, and then they get, into the behind the cabinets in the kitchens, they chew a hole in the wall, and then they get up into the cabinets. When we pull the cabinets out, when we pull out the vanities and pull out those wet walls in the kitchens and bathrooms, and also when we work in the utility closets, they will go back in and they will close, and they have to close by code, all of those holes. So that will help, that'll significantly help the rodent and pest problem by eliminating the way that rodents or pests can just move to other apartments. When you make life miserable over here because you've done, pest control over here, and they just move elsewhere, they won't be able to just move elsewhere like they can now. So that's how the rodent and pest problem is being addressed in the renovation.
Okay, so there's a question. Will this new exterior take away living square space? So with all the renovations.
No, it will not. It will not.
Okay,
The living space will, there's nothing, when we do the new exteriors, that won't push out the inside walls and take away living space. When we in the high rise, when we replace the existing HVAC, those utility closets that house the HVAC units and the hot water heaters, they may have to be resized. Well, in some cases, they will have to be resized to meet current code, fire code and other codes. And so the changing of those utility closets could have a small impact on the living space, and it could make the a living room area be a little bit smaller than it currently is, or a hallway, or in some cases maybe a bedroom, although we're trying to minimize that as much as possible. It shouldn't be a big impact, but I don't want to. I want to make sure that you have all the information that I have. When we upgrade the HVAC, the codes may require some of those units just be bigger, and it's basically a fire issue. They want to make sure that there's enough ventilation that gets into those units, and there's room for workers to get in. So they're just minimum standards for the size of them. And we're looking at units replacement units that will impact that in the least way possible.
can we choose not to have the mechanical closet?
Say that again.
Can we choose not to increase the mechanical closet? That was from Crystal Johnson, and she also has another question. I think I don't know what mechanical closet is, but I know we have so many questions, so in order to kind of get through them, we probably gonna have to.
Yeah, the mechanical closet, because I had talked about this, I think in September, and told everybody when we had the architect out that those mechanical closets, in some cases, particularly in the high rise, they may have to be resized. Well, they will have to be resized for code requirements. I don't know that they're going to actually, the way that we're trying to do it is resize them so they don't take away living space, just changes the way that the wall is shaped. Instead of being boxy like a square, they may be more rectangular, so they're skinny but longer. But the answer to the question, can we not have the mechanical closets changed? The answer to that question is no, there's no way around that, because it's a legal requirement that those mechanical closets fit code. And for the high efficiency HVAC units that are being proposed, and actually any unit now that would be proposed, they will have to be reconfigured somewhat. So there's just no way around that.
Is there
And again, it's not because we want to do that, it's because we'll be forced to by code requirement.
Is there an option to possibly just allocate more money to create multi-floor parking lots? Because 14th Street has gotten worse due to the bus lanes.
I mean, we do in the new proposed building, if we go forward with it, there will be 2 1/4 floors of parking. So yes, there'll be multi-floor parking. I think what you're also asking in that question though is, can we add even more parking? Right now you've got 65 parking spaces. And if you're asking, can we get more parking for Columbia Heights Village from 65, say up to 90 or something like that? That's not part of the current plan to increase the amount of parking that currently is allocated or is available in the parking lot. And I don't know that we'll be able to do that. In fact, I don't think we can just increase it, because structured parking in parking garages, because it's all concrete and steel structure, it's very, very expensive to create a parking garage. Plus it has to have high efficiency ventilation to keep it safe and that sort of thing. So we're not looking at increasing the parking available to Columbia Heights Village residents. We're making sure that we don't lose any of it, and that you have all of the parking you have now in a nice covered parking garage.
Okay.
If we could increase it, we would. It's not economically feasible, and the sources of money that we're getting to do this, they won't pay for more parking. Is, I guess, the short answer.
So windows, this is from an anonymous about the garden units. Windows will be replaced, correct? So protect the heat and
Yes, that's correct.
coming out. And what about noise? Will they be like soundproof as well?
No, there's not well, other than the windows themselves will be more soundproof. We're not doing specifically adding soundproofing into the units, like that would require tearing out drywall and putting in more soundproofing in the units, or tearing out the ceilings, putting soundproofing in between the floors. The additional benefit for sound transmission will come from, we'll have insulated thermopane windows that will have an airspace in them. It'll just be more, the window itself will be more soundproof. The windows should be sealed around the outside better to prevent air moving in, and wherever air can move it back and forth in through that space, sound can get in without any kind of barrier to it entering. Then the flooring that we put down will have an acoustical layer, but it's not going to really improve the sound. That would require tearing out a lot of more space, and it would add significantly more time to the construction and the relocation.
There's a question they want to know, can we, and I guess it's just, I don't know, yes or no, can we get stoves with microwaves? You know, the stoves that have the microwaves on top to reduce the counter space and cabinet area. This 2,900 building kitchens don't have a lot of counter space and cabinetry. So can they get stoves with microwaves?
I don't know the short answer. And so what I'm thinking is I need to go back and check on the plans and specifications to see what they're going back with. And so Brett, Ruby, will you please make a note to get with the architect this week?
Also, and if you're dealing with that, I forgot about the windows. You talked about the windows, but
Well, wait, let me finish this
okay,
question. I just want to make sure that we don't lose track of this.
Okay.
We should check with the architect to see if when we specify the replacement appliances, we can add microwaves. That seems like something that that should be simple. And I can tell you, unless there's some structural impediment to it, having to do with blocking ventilation space or something weird like that, I don't see any reason why we can't. We just need to make sure that it's included. If people want microwaves, and I would think you would, we may already have them specified. We'll find out this week and have that prepared. We can answer that question at either the next meeting, or we can send out an email to everybody. So Brett, if you can just put that on the list of stuff to follow up with the architect.
Following with the architect, there's a question about bulletproof windows, very unsafe. Windows get shot through. If we're going to invest in all of this new infrastructure, it would be nice to know that residents can be safe in their own home.
I understand why you're asking that. We haven't looked into bulletproof windows. I think that's going to be really expensive, but we'll ask the question and see what the cost differential is. I'm also not sure that the district and the funding for Columbia Heights Village, the renovation, is coming from tax credits and tax credit uses that have to be approved. I don't know if the district would allow for us to put in bulletproof windows if there's much cost differential. I understand why you're asking that. And I have to say, we didn't look at that. We can ask the architect what to price it out for us. And I'll let you know. I know that that's an issue there.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I know that those could be expensive. However, we gotta figure out, what do we need to do? Like, do we need to do something? Because, now we probably need to also address some crime, which I don't know if everything like that could be addressed on this call. But it would be good if, as a tenant association, we use some of the funds that you get through these development deals and stuff to put in programming and stuff for the area. Because, it would be, we need to do something. So I'm with you, whoever asked that question. Okay. Did you ever answer, John, specifically where residents will be located? Will be relocated? Is that?
No, we'll get into that in this next section.
Okay.
And so I want to, actually, we're running, it's 7:20. We should try to move into the unless there's some huge questions. Let me look at the chat real quickly. See, will there be in-unit washers and dryers in the existing building? No, in the new building, because we don't have the hookups for in-unit washers and dryers in the existing building. In the new buildings, I believe, in the new building that we proposed, I think that they do have washer dryer hookups. And because you can just do it in a new building, because you're kind of dealing with brand new space, and running the plumbing it's easy in a new building.
So John, may I interject real quick? I wanted just to follow up on two questions. One was about the rodents. The rodent problem is a problem throughout the whole city, and we've been fighting it tirelessly. But we do need the residents' help. Right now, I don't know if you all on this call are aware of this, but we have people that lives in the 2900 building and people that live in the garden apartments that believe it's a good idea to not take your trash outside to the dumpsters or put it down the chute, but sometimes our neighbors are placing their trash bags outside their units all night and not taking their trash out. And some of the homes are in such conditions where there are breeding grounds for mice. So we have to pay close attention to our units and our neighbors as far as what your neighbors, if you're not the person that's putting your trash in the hallway, this doesn't pertain to you. But when you see your neighbor doing this, you need to call the rental office and let them know that your neighbors are doing this. We also have a group of neighbors in the garden apartments that believe that's a good idea to take their trash bags and just dump them off the balcony. Now, no matter how many pest control companies we get, it's going to be hard to impossible to fight people that choose to just dump their trash over the balcony and leave them in the hallways. As far as with the violence, that's terrible too. It's gotten better, but what we're finding is that nobody will shoot at somebody that's not there. The people that are being shot at are your neighbors. They are the people that sometimes you have overhoused population where you have people that stand in your house from across the town, your cousin, your brother, your nephew, your baby father, and they're staying in these units and they're bringing this criminal element to our property. And if you all are seeing this and you all continue to allow this and don't report it, don't say anything, you're a bigger part of the problem than you are with the solution. So if you see something, you need to report this to the resident manager because Mrs. Howe's been doing a good job at trying to enforce some of these things, but she can't be everywhere all the time. So if you know these people that are doing these things in and out your apartments, and particularly in the garden apartments where all the shooting is happening at, you have to say something. That's the only way we're going to be able to fight this. A program will not help you if you have people that's a criminal element standing in your apartment and causing these violence. Thank you for that, John. Sorry about that.
No, that's true. Management has faced some real challenges in dealing with residents that are harming the property over the last couple of years during COVID. However, if there are residents who are clearly acting in a criminal way and that's harming the property, then they can do something about it as long as they get it on record. But I wanted to just kind of wrap up this part before we go into the relocation and let you know that in the next month we'll be submitting an application for financing. We can still make changes at that time, or we could pull it if we needed to. What we did do we submitted papers for what's called a threshold review to make sure that if we wanted to get financing, this would pass. And so we've gotten some comments back, and we would like to proceed with it. We hope that you, the residents of Columbia Heights Village, think this could be a nice addition to the neighborhood, and are satisfied with the parking solution to make sure that you don't lose parking. And it can add some additional community amenities through, community space that can be used by residents of Columbia Heights Village. Anyway, if you've got more questions, use that Dropbox or email address, and we'll answer your questions, directly through email, and there'll be a record of that that'll be permanent. So I'm going to turn this back over to Evan to make the introductions for this tenant relocation section next.
Sure. Thank you, John. And Raquel, could you go back to the PowerPoint? We have Katie, who is going to be helping us, and her company's name is Housing to Home. She'll be helping us during the relocation process. Is there any
Stopping the screen share.
Okay. So is there any way you could unmute her so she can kind of introduce herself and talk us through the relocation piece?
What's her name?
Katie Provencher.
Katie Provencher. Katie with a K.
Yes.
Katie Provencher. Okay. I've just promoted you to panelist. Yes.
Hey, y'all. Good evening.
Hello.
Everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So thanks for the introduction, Evan and John. Great overview. So I know we are late and short on time, so happy to go through a few slides with folks, and then happy to join another time to dig more in if needed. If we could just go to the next slide. Or do I have? I don't think I have control of the.
I think you need to keep going. Another slide
Yep.
and another.
Okay, great.
There we
This is perfect. So Hannah and I both own and run Housing to Home. We're a woman business enterprise, and we have a number of very similar relocation work that we do in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And have a staff of about 12 of us, a number of folks who are in the DMV area as well. Thank you. Next slide. And so our mission and why we're working with this team is to really work with every resident through any relocation that needs to happen for this project. And we're still a little ways off, but we've started talking, planning, looking at what apartments are available. I know that's been a big question this evening. I will say what's available today looks very different in a month, never mind in 6 months. So just started getting some availability around, but that will be a big part of our job as we get closer to relocation, is looking at available units. And so our job is to support residents every step of the way, from understanding what's going on in your household, what your relocations options are, what would be a good fit for you. Great. And I guess we'll go through the chat after. I think we have a number of questions in chat. Make sure we're getting you packing supplies, working with movers or helping you move, identifying units and getting you moved there. So our job is every step of the way to make sure that you're good to go with anything relocation. Next slide, please. That's fine. So we're going to have ongoing resident communication and meetings. We'll be meeting one-on-one, We'll be meeting one-on-one with residents to gather information and talk about general relocation options. You'll be receiving what's called a general information notice, which will provide information about what's happening with the redevelopment. And we'll let people know that this work is happening. We've secured all our funding and the redevelopment is going to happen. We'll be getting out relocation notices to everyone. There's particular notices that have to happen, and we'll be taking care of that. Locating, securing units, packing as needed, and getting a licensed bond and moving. Great. Next slide. And so here's just some example of possible nearby housing locations. This is, like I said, this will look a lot different in a few weeks, in a few months, but this is just some of the options that are available today. Great. And
Katie, can I jump in for a second?
Of course.
And if you could go back to the options.
Please.
These three options, it started out with a bigger list. We looked at it and eliminated a number that we thought, based on feedback from folks who know the neighborhood, know the sort of the press, There were some places that looked like they were good options, but we took them off because we thought you, the residents of Columbia Heights Village, wouldn't like them. That may change in the future. Some places that that are great places today may have bad management in 6 months from now, and they may have to drop from the list or whatever. But this gives you, if we were going to do the relocation today, this gives you 3 examples of the types of places that are available and are close by, and would you can actually go and see whether or not it's what they're like. But you have to recognize that because we won't actually be doing any relocation until next fall, it's too far out to get any of these under contract. So if you go and look at them, don't go in the office and say, hey, where's my unit? Because they won't have anything for you, but you can go there and see what we're proposing if it was today. And when I met with you in November, I told you we didn't have any specific examples at that time. But I knew this was really important because you'd want to know what kind of places are these folks talking about moving us into. So this is what's available today that that is that made the cut. Some didn't make the cut that were on the initial list, and we said no, we need to take those off. But this is just 3 examples.
Thanks for clarifying that, John. And yeah, I can't emphasize enough how much we do this every day. We have a lot of different projects in DC. We talk to different landlords. They know what we're looking for. And this looks a lot different as we get closer. So I appreciate you clarifying that. And thank you for the folks that are putting the addresses in the chat. So just want to point out it's timely because we're here on Zoom, unfortunately, again this evening. We are very much in the midst of COVID-19. And so as we're starting to meet with folks one-on-one, as we're having other vendors be on site, they'll make sure that we're following all the updated COVID-19 protocols, people wearing PPE, maintaining a safe distance, if folks are sick, staying home. And as we start meeting with people, if you're not comfortable with meeting in person and prefer a phone call or virtual meeting, then we'll absolutely make that happen as well. Again, our job, whether it's relocation or navigating COVID while moving, our job is to make sure this works for you and your family as best as possible, knowing that relocation is difficult and frustrating, and our job is to take as much of that off of you all as possible. Next slide, please. So let's just go to the next steps real quick, if we could, the next slide, and then happy for John to help navigate the chat. So you do not need to do anything at this time. Please don't move. Nothing is happening tomorrow or next week. We're working with the team to figure out a resident assessment to start gathering data around relocation options for you and your families. And then in the upcoming months, the first formal relocation notice you'll get is called a General Information Notice, or a GIN. And that notice is required to go out to all residents who are going to be impacted by the renovations, redevelopment, and relocation. But we'll be meeting many more times before people receive those general information notices. But just wanted to let you know that will be the first formal notice that you'll receive. John, is there anything else you'd like me to cover? I know we're way out of time.
Well, one thing that I wanted to add is that I think I might have talked about in the last meeting, the November meeting, is, and it's probably one of the next things we can do to give residents more information. We're working with the contractor, the general contractor, to give us their construction schedule of when they're going to be taking what buildings at different times. We know in the high rise that right now, and this is probably going to maintain, it probably won't be changed. We know that they're going to be taking the high rise in 7 different sections to do renovation. So it would be 21, is it 21 units? Let's see, 3 risers, not 9 floors, 27 units at a time in the high rise. I don't know exactly where, we haven't figured where they're going to start yet and how each phase will come along, but there'll be 7 different phases where 27 units move out of the high rise. So we can do all of that, you know, from the first floor up through the 10th floor. All of those units that are on top of each other in that slice of 1/7 of the building. In the gardens, we'll be doing a whole build, because they're smaller buildings. We'll be doing a couple of whole buildings at a time. And they're still working out some of the demands for things like stormwater retention and where they're going to stage bringing in construction equipment and things like that. So I hope that by the next meeting, and I'd actually hope to have it this meeting, and if I told you that we would, please accept my apology. We weren't able to get the staging plan to you at this time, but what we hope is by our February meeting, we can give you the staging plan so that you'll know that about when your time for the relocation will occur. Not everybody, in fact, it'll be a relatively small portion. It'll be about 10%, roughly 10-12% of the property that'll have to do that temporary relocation starting in October of this year. And then everybody else will come in chunks over the course of the next 24 months. So that, I think, is the next thing that we'll do. We'll have these meetings every month from now till closing to keep you updated as we have more information on both on relocation, like the staging, and as we have any updates on systems and some of your questions today, like microwaves, bulletproof windows, and there was another critical question that we're trying to get answered for you, but those follow-ups on those questions. The biggest thing we wanted to do today was to let you know that we've hired a high quality firm that has plenty of staff to do this in housing to home, and Katie and her staff are basically going to be working for you, the residents, to facilitate this move. We do this kind of thing all the time successfully, but I'm not an expert in this. I couldn't possibly do this right for you. That's why we hire somebody who's really, this is what they do. They make these temporary relocations go as smoothly as possible. It's going to be, yes, it'll be a hassle, but at the end of it, you're going to have a nice new apartment. Your neighbors will too, and Columbia Heights Village is just going to be a much nicer place. So chat questions that have popped up during this time. Let's take a look at those. Are there new questions that have just come in?
So John, that people we dropped the addresses in the chat. Someone clarifying if the Harvard Court will have its own management office, resident service office, and tenant association office.
Yeah, I think we've answered those questions.
And
Um,
then I think that the new one that just came in, and I think we've talked about it already, is how long will the redevelopment take place before people can move back into their new units?
yeah, it's right now, it's looking like about 2.5 months that you would be out, maybe 2 months. And the gardens, it ought to be a shorter time, I hope. But that's it. I've been saying 3 months. The contractor's saying about 2.5 months, and they've been holding firm on that.
I think that's about it since I was talking.
Let's see, during the renovation, will other things in the units be fixed? Closet rails, yes. The closet door, those bifold doors that don't work very well, they're for the closets, they'll all be replaced with brand new doors that work well.
I have a question, John. Does this project trigger section 3? At all? Are you familiar with section 3?
Yeah, I am. Well, it does under tax credit requirements, will be using, I know we'll be doing Davis-Bacon wages. Because we're not getting district funds, I'm not sure the full extent of the section 3 requirements. We'll have to find that out.
Like, will these projects have any HUD funding? It's really for HUD financially assisted entities.
The new project, if we build it on the parking lot, will. And it will trigger full section 3 requirements.
The new one. So this is
And
the opportunity that maybe, because with section 3, for those that's listening, it really means that HUD financially assisted entities, or wherever HUD monies are, appropriated to the greatest extent feasible, training, employment, contracting opportunities are supposed to be afforded to low-income residents, but not because you're low income, but because you are a qualified business entity with the expertise to perform the contract. But there's other opportunities. So this may be a great time for some of you who may have small businesses, or other people in the area with small businesses like moving companies or excavation or landscaping, cleaning, construction, HVAC engineer. If there's a lot of work that is going to be done on these properties, and if of small businesses, make sure you bring their attention, come to the CHVTA office and let them know, so that when these opportunities do come about, you can be on a list so that they can make sure that you know about it.
yeah, for Harvard Court, one of the things that would happen, assuming we go forward with this, and the construction would happen about the same time, or start about the same time, probably 6 months later. I think what we'd be doing is having a jobs fair and looking for people in Columbia Heights Village who could work on the construction. The contractor would be pulling that kind of thing together. And it'll have very specific requirements that go with it. We can do the same thing for the construction of the renovation of Columbia Heights Village. It will be a little different though. Harvard Court this new building is the one that is going to have that full section 3 requirement, where the contractor will go out and have these sort of job fairs where they're trying to draw folks from right there in the community, and specifically out of Columbia Heights Village. All right. So I don't know. Excuse me. Our monthly meetings are corresponding to regular tenant association meetings that are open to all the residents. So I don't know when the next one is. Paul, maybe you could chime in and let us know, because we'll we'll do another one of these meetings in February to update you again, to keep you apprised. I think some of you have gotten really nervous because over the course of the last year, during COVID, it was difficult, but even with COVID, we'll do these monthly virtually if necessary, and as soon as possible back in person, because that's just a better way to do it. But we committed in November that we would, start with monthly meetings beginning in January, and that's what we intend to do.
Thank you,
So
John.
someone wanted to ask if they have recommendations for businesses, can they submit it to that CHV redevelopment email? Is that the appropriate email?
It is, I think what would be, and you can do that, but I think what we'll do, the best way to handle this is when we get more information, we'll have an email where you can submit it directly to the contractor. That way it won't get lost in kind of the mix. But you can submit it to us. That'll actually, for now, that's a good way to go. We'll later ask you to resubmit it to the contractor, but now it gives us kind of a head count of people that are interested. And that would be helpful.
And I guess maybe a roundabout based on when you plan to have the job fair. They said due to COVID, that might be inconvenient.
But for now, let's just think about, for now, go ahead and submit it into the email, and we can start keeping account of how many people would like to be included in that list.
Okay, Paul, they said, will you be having some meetings in the upcoming days for residents? Will CHVTA be having meetings?
And
Yes,
and I think that's as distinct from these development meetings.
Yes, they want to know about the.
right. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Thank you, John. I was just about to address that. To answer John's question first, this development meeting happened on the same day that we would usually have our tenant association meeting. And the reason it happened that way because we was getting an overwhelming amount of questions regarding redevelopment. And we thought that we should have a meeting strictly to tackle redevelopment. But we will have a makeup meeting in the next coming, probably more so next week. Look out for flyers and/or text messages and/or email messages regarding the date of those messages. I mean, of that particular meeting. I think we had a good meeting tonight. I think everybody had a lot of good questions. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people, well, I know a lot of people didn't come to the meeting, but the meeting will be posted on YouTube so you can review it later. If you have any additional suggestions about how these meetings should be handled, with the exception of live, which we know we would like to have it live, but even this way, it allows us to ask you a specific question, and it gives a chance for almost everybody to can get their question answered, and it keeps us safe from contracting the new variant of COVID. Just moving forward, could everybody make sure they wear their mask and be very careful? If you are sick, please quarantine and stay in the house. Don't come outside and walk the hallways, which I've seen some residents do that have COVID. Please be just mindful. The people that experiencing these mice issues, please send emails to Mrs. High and let her know that you're having these mice issues. Not go to the office and bang on the door and make a big scene. We need to keep this in writing because since I've been in the office, we've been fighting this mice issue, and there's not a true way of calculating which methods are working best, besides hearing from you all. Also, say something to your neighbors about leaving their trash in the hallways, throwing their trash off the balconies. That's crazy. I have no understanding of that, and you all shouldn't have an understanding or tolerate it also. The violence needs to stop, but like I say, there won't be a shooting if there's nobody to shoot at. It's just simple as that. If there's nobody to shoot at, won't nobody shoot. So if it's your kids or your baby father or your girlfriend or your husband or something that's doing the shooting or getting shot at, ask them to leave, because they're not just endangering you, but they're endangering all the rest of us too, and particularly in the garden apartments, because these bullets, they go through windows and walls. And we just been fortunate that we haven't had a murder from somebody that's sitting at their dining room table. And we had to take responsibility for that. And you have to say something, because we got to protect ourselves. Thank you. Didn't mean to be too long.
Let me quickly answer a question that came in from Ms. Harris that is pretty important to her, having to do with income on the property and will it be the same in the new location? First of all, I'm not sure why you'd have a new location. You should be going back into the same unit you came out of, unless you are trying to get a different unit size. So that's one. Two, I don't know all the specifics of how your income may have changed. I think it's going to be the same. What you really need to do is talk to management, because the way of calculating your income will be exactly the same after the renovation as it is now. Your rent is going to be based on your income. So if your income has gone down, your Section 8 rent, assuming you're Section 8 eligible, which almost everyone is, if your income has gone down, your rent will go down. If your income has gone up, your rent will go up. So hopefully that answered your question, Ms. Harris. But you really, for specifics, you should talk to property management about whether or not your rent should go up or down right now as it is, because the rules are going to be the same before or after construction. So I just wanted to answer that one, because it looked like that was something somebody'd be worried about. But thank you all very much and Paul and Catherine and everyone who attended. I appreciate your time, and I will continue having these meetings between now and closing, and more questions will come up. We'll try to answer all of them, and if we can't, we'll work on getting answers in between the meetings. So Raquel, thank you for hosting this event, helping us out here.
Guys,
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
yes. Have a good night. Bye, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.